like conversation or like an incident that you keep coming back to, or that like gets you motivated, or maybe just inspires you in some way?
It's always, I think it's my dad. So my dad was an engineer, he's a mechanical engineer.
Like him.
Yeah, exactly, like you, yes. And he used to work in an Indian company, one of the public firms there that used to make televisions.
Which one?
ECTV,
EC.
Electronic Corporation of India Limited. That's where my dad used to work. But he was not in the team that made television. He was in the team that made antennas.
Okay.
Like these dish antennas,
Right,
huge
right.
antennas, right? So later on in his life, like close to his retirement, he was actually involved in India's moon mission, Chandrayaan. His team was actually involved in building the dish antennas and things for the thing itself, which he used to be very excited. He would come home and talk about it. So he had a very scientific mind. And very early on, when I was in school, like 5th grade, 6th grade, he once sat me down and he said, I'm going to tell you one thing which is going to be very useful for you, which is planning. You got to plan everything and plan backwards. What is your deadline? Plan backwards from it until today, right? So I used to do this exercise before, like literally every exam in school. Initially, my dad would help me through it, but after a while, I just like automatically start doing it myself, and say, okay, I have a history exam on Monday, geography exam on Wednesday, English exam on Friday. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Be studying every hour of the week, starting from Saturday before, right? Not 24 hours of the day, but like whatever, 7 a.m., 6 a.m. or whenever I would wake up until 9 p.m. whenever I would. And I think that planning is really important. Clearly, it was very useful for me in school, but even now, I think planning is useful when you're trying to meet a deadline for a paper submission, or trying to meet a deadline for a homework submission or a programming assignment submission. And so I would say I always keep coming back to that conversation, and also what my dad taught me about about planning in the subsequent conversations until I became an independent planner. The other thing, which is also the subtle thing about planning, which sometimes when I talk about planning, people are like, oh, okay, whatever, but people don't get, is when you make a plan, you need to be gentle on yourself. You always need to acknowledge that every plan will always overflow. You make a plan for, okay, I need 2 hours to do this, it will take 3 hours. So build in buffer time. You say, okay, 2 hours for this, 2 hours for this, buffer time of 1 hour for something to overflow. Maybe the first one will overflow, maybe the second one will overflow. I don't know which one. And then, something else for 3 hours or whatever. Build in enough buffer times. If you finish that in time, well, you have an extra hour free. Fantastic. Otherwise, you have some time to overflow, and the next thing doesn't get shifted in a sense, right? So that, I think, is very important. It's something that I try to communicate to students. Some of them do it better than others, but it's something certainly that sticks with me. I still remember my dad would sit down and do planning with me before some exams when I was in 5th grade, and then sometime in the middle of 6th grade, he once came into my room as I was studying, and he was like, okay, let's sit down and do the plan. And I had the plan up on the wall. He's like, wow, okay, my job is done. He just went out and he said, okay, I'm never going to come back and talk to you about planning. That's it. That was the last conversation I had with him about planning, ever. He never talked to me about planning ever after that. He's like, you got it. That's it.
I used to do that a lot too, like during exam seasons. I would, if I have like 2 weeks left before this exam start, I would plan out, okay, these days I'll be studying this subject. And then you make smaller deadlines. And
So that's very useful. The flip side of planning is that you can become very obsessive about planning.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the bad.
That's the really bad side. So I think it's important, again, to continue to be gentle on yourself and everyone else around you too, whether it's your friends or family or whatever. I still remember once where it was the day before, this was again in school, actually it was in high school, the day before a very important exam, and one of my childhood friends just happened to visit with his dad. And I was furious. I was like, I had this plan for this day of what to study when, and this person just comes in and burns 4 hours of my time. And I was staring there, glaring at him. And afterwards they had left and the exam got done. It was fine. The exam was okay. Afterwards, I felt so bad for having felt so bad. Like it's like I did not enjoy the 3 hours of that time where my childhood friend was sitting in front of me and like I couldn't talk to him properly. And this was one of the few times that they'd visited my house. We were talking about regrets, right? So this is again another one of my minor regrets. But that's the flip side of planning. You can get really obsessive about it, right? You can say, oh, my buffers are getting burned. I'm sitting here, like I had a 1 hour buffer, and now it's already 1 hour since my friend has been here. Right? I still remember counting that in my mind. But that was me being not gentle on myself and not also realizing, maybe because I was immature, not realizing the value of the time that I was spending with that person, right? At the end of the day, that's at the end of the day, I don't remember that exam, but I remember this conversation.
Exactly.
Right? And the thinking in my mind. So I think that's the flip side of planning. So I think it's important to plan, but not plan too obsessively. Not over plan, and be gentle on yourself. I think that's really, really